Pat, thanks for coming along today. Really appreciate you coming in, dropping
Really,
in.
really appreciate being a part of it and looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. So I'm going to give you a quick introduction. Probably don't need really an introduction for Irish people, certainly the Irish basketball community. Because I spent a considerable amount of time in the UK and played basketball there for a while, some UK people, but again, may or may not know you depending on how much they know about the NBA during the 2000s kind of era. But so, Pat, you're a former Irish international player and you're an ex-NBA player, and you've won the EuroLeague, incredible. The Spanish ACB League, you've also won that with, I think it was with Real Madrid, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and the Greek League, you're on three winning teams for that. I also saw Polish and Russian League in there as well. And I'm interested in the Russian League, particularly. Polish League, I'd probably like to ask some questions about that league as well.
Sure.
But that's, I mean, that's impressive, just to say that straight off the bat. Firstborn Irish player to play in the NBA. I know you've heard that one a lot. I'd say, I don't know if you're proud of it or sick of hearing it, but I'd say you're both.
Always proud. Always proud. It's something that, obviously within the Irish community and through my family, I think every time I go to my mom and dad's house, my dad might invite me to the dinner table like that. Come on over here, the first Irish born NBA. Have your mom stew over here.
He doesn't give you a name, just the first Irish.
Yeah, come on.
Okay, right. So you were born, I'll tell you this, I don't know if you're aware of this, because you were born in the Midlands. At least I think Offaly's in the Midlands area.
Yes, yeah.
So I don't know if you knew that, but certainly I'm from the Midlands. I'm from a town called.
Oh, okay.
So you're very close to my town. So you would have grown up with an accent. I would say it's like mine, but mine's kind of neutralized because I spent a lot of time out of the Midlands.
Yeah.
But you probably would have grown up with a Midlands accent. I'd say you would have played County Gaelic for Offaly because you're a big fella and you're pretty mobile. So I'm guessing you would have played County and you would have been slightly better than Longford, who were probably one of the worst teams in Ireland. So that's right. That could have been your alternative future.
I could have been, but I'd have to argue with it in this household.
Right.
My dad's from Mayo, so there was always that talk of who we would have played for. You know, there's actually 4 boys in my family, but me having this freakish height and athleticism, that they were always talking about that. So a lot of even my aunts and uncles were always kind of looking like, well, wouldn't it have been great if he had stayed and played? So
you would have. I think you would have played for Offaly because you would have grown up in school there and you would have had your roots there. So like my dad was from Leitrim, so he would have worked at Leitrim, but ultimately I would have played for Longford because I lived there. Now again, your parents might say different, but
yeah. Well, maybe if that was happening right when the growth spurt started to happen, my dad would have been packing the house like, come on, we gotta get back to Mayo.
Well, that's what it's like. I mean,
there's people counting on us.
I mean, it's so parochial like that. It's literally like if somebody can grab you in. I often compared it. I came back from Germany, and I was back, and I hadn't kicked a Gaelic football since I was 15. This isn't a joke. And I wasn't a bit like you. I was a late developer. I grew to 6'6" when I was like, again, not your height, but like not 6'7",
but still tall.
Yeah, still fairly tall. So, but when I was 15, I was 5'7", and I wasn't particularly athletic at that point either. So I wasn't much good to anyone, and nobody was interested. But when I came back at 6'6", and my brother was playing Gaelic for the county team, I literally got told to come along, and they put me on the team for a year. That's how. And my uncle asked me to come and play for the club, and he's like, Mark, come out and play some football. And I was like, I haven't played like in years, and it was literally like being in the mafia. He was like, oh, don't worry, we'll get you some boots. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
So they'll kind of they'll drag you back in. So I think he would have ended up playing for somebody.
Sure.
That's just the way it is.
A couple years back, Mark, I was Mayo was in the finals. And I want to say they were up against Dublin, and anyways, after they didn't win the game, they didn't win the match. We went to the hotel afterwards, big reception hall, kind of the champions and just getting their champions, let's say, were having their celebration, and some gentlemen from the Mayo County Club came up to me. What height are you? where are you from? Where's your father from? And I started to tell them. And the funniest thing is they were sitting there looking like, are you athletic? And I'm like, well, I play professional basketball. And they're like, is there any money in that? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, how much? And I started to tell them, like, you know, what I was making at Real Madrid at the time. They're like, get the fuck out of here.
I was actually going to ask you to do an accent, and that's actually not bad. I've heard a few. Was it Far and Away? Because there's been a couple of movies where American guys have done accents.
Oh, geez. You get me around my parents, and it's not so much an accent, but it's the way you phrase things. Yeah, you just change the words a little bit. It's not like, you know, I'd have to be around them, but it's almost like, you know, have you ate? You know, where you wouldn't say that, and you wouldn't say that in America. But so, like, you know, I would have high school friends that would come over, and, you know, like, you'd have friends over and you'd be sitting there and you're having a little bit of a conversation. And next thing you know, I tell my friend, hey, I'm going to go back, get some clothes, change, and I'll be right back out. And I'd leave him for about 20 minutes. And then I'd come out, change, have my clothes, and we'd be heading out. And I'd get in the car with my friend. He'd be like, what the hell is your dad saying? And I said, what are you talking about? You're having a conversation with him for 20 minutes saying yes. He said, I was saying yes to everything he was saying.
But you're right. It's interesting because I think it's because the kind of the etymology of all that kind of mixed up words. I didn't know this until I read this book. There's a book, and I would recommend you read it. It's listed as one of the best books like to ever come out of Ireland. It's called The Island Man. And it's
The Island Man.
Yeah, The Island Man. I'll send you the Amazon link or whatever.
Okay.
And I ended up reading this a few years ago, and I think back in the day it would have been on the school kind of curriculum or whatever. And it was translated from Irish. So it's written in that old poetic Irish kind of way.
Nice.
And that's why a lot of Irish language is so jumbled up, because old Irish language was then translated back into English when we were, you know, as part of the empire or whatever.
My parents definitely still have that, and it's something that I don't notice when I'm in. It's almost like you know, a fish trying to explain water. They don't know it's there, so I don't know it's happening when I'm in there. And next thing you know, my wife will look at me like, "Why are you talking like that?" I'm like, "Talking like what?" And I don't know I'm even doing it. I'm just blending back in.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I moved back just a year ago, like permanently to Ireland from being in the UK, and I used to love coming back, just the warmth of the people. And I'd get on the plane and some old Irish guy be beside me, just winking at me, not putting his belt on or something. And straight away, just that kind of, just like kind of, just so relaxed, and so everything's very relaxed. So I kind of understand, having been away for so long. Like, I love coming back and experiencing all that kind of Irishness, I suppose.
Yeah, I miss it a lot. You know, I've been back so many times, but there is a sense of a very genuine. You're going to have a genuine chat. You know, it doesn't matter who. It could be family, friends, or someone you're just sitting there at a pub or someone, and you're just going to have a chat with them, and it's going to be something that, you know, it may not be so profound, but it's in the moment. It's real. Over here, it's like, hey, how you doing? Okay, and it's just so surface deep, and now, you know, it's like, does anybody have a little time here to love life a little bit?
And the more rural you go in Ireland, the more, like, literally be a guy standing at a wall asking you some very profound questions about your life. And you're kind of going, okay. Like, it just end up, you could sit and talk to this person for like 40 minutes. The guy at the wall.
Oh yeah. They have a million questions. And the funny thing is like when an Irishman too also finds out you're from America, they get very curious about, you know, what do you do over there? And that, you know, it's like, I don't know if they expect like you're going to all of a sudden talk John Wayne style. You're like, well, I'm from Orlando, Florida. And they're sitting there like, oh, geez, this is the guy. We need to be talking to him. Tell us about America, you know? But it's funny too, and this is kind of a tangent on this. When I was playing for the Irish national team, it got to a point where I wouldn't even share that we were playing for the Irish national team, because a number of Irish, you know, whether it was at a pub or somewhere, they would be looking at you like, you're not Irish, you know? And I'd be like, okay, well, I'm not going to explain anything. I mean, you know, I think when I go home and my mom and dad are talking to me, I feel like I'm Irish. No, I didn't grow up in Ireland, but it's like you get over there and they're asking, because they see the height and they're like, well, so what are you doing over here? And they're like, oh, we're playing basketball over here. And you wouldn't even get into the Irish national team. And it's just something that, there's a definitely not an insult to the Irish Americans coming in, but there was a sense of pride for Irish that it was like, well, how is no, we're, you know, Ireland people play for Ireland, you know, and it was like, well, I don't know how to, I don't know how to like win you over on this one, so I won't. You know, so
I don't know if you ever followed soccer in the 90s. You know, Jack Charlton just passed away.
Yes,
He was the soccer manager back in the day. He was actually from, I suppose, the UK, North England, and there was a player called Paul McGrath, and he was a black Irish guy who grew up in Dublin, and I think it was Tommy Tiernan. I don't know if you know who Tommy Tiernan is. He's a comedian. He's a very funny comedian. I think you'd like him, actually. I might send you a link to him as well. But anyway, Tommy has his own show now, and it's become quite popular. So I don't know if you've heard of the Late Late, but that's our equivalent of like the Tonight Show.
Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah. So this guy Gay Byrne used to present it. Now he's I think he passed away. I want to say I could have that completely wrong. Again, just moved back. That's my excuse. So anyway, Tommy Tiernan, this is like basically the #1 Irish comedian at the moment. He's the Scottish comedian. The guy from Glasgow. Name's gone out of my head now. He's the equivalent for us, and he's very funny. He started the chat show, and he brought this guy on, and he was saying, you know, being Irish is not about the color of your skin. It's a feeling, or it's a way of being. Like, and that's, I think, you know, I'm just trying to just jump away.
No, I think it's the word I would say, it's like, it's a culture, you know. Now, obviously when there's two people, it reverberates more and it's thick. When it's one person, you know, obviously like an island, it's isolated, and but you can definitely sense the difference, because in my travels back and forth, I've recognized that Ireland has a definite, deep sense of community. So it's like if there is an issue or a challenge facing a community, everybody gets together to talk about it. The Irish are extremely humble in their ability to like talk about, you know, challenges or what's going on, you know, over a pint or whatever. It's like, hey, we're gonna talk this out. I really feel, and again, not to get so far and deep into the differences and challenges, but the distinction is the United States has a lot more confidence and I hate to say this, but not so much everyone is a fake it till you make it, but it's like they have a bravado of like, hey, we're going to be okay. We're doing my backyard barbecue, and we're doing this, and everything is great, and we're going to live, you know, like this. And it's like, okay, so when does the reality of, like when we talked about earlier, when does the reality of that chat come along where you actually talk about, you know, the challenges of what's going on,
the adversity,
and when you talk about that in a household to 10 households to a town, and nobody's doing it, you don't have a sense of community because everybody's in a rat race trying to do their own thing. So you don't have that connection, and we don't have the same social pint, if you will, like about just sitting and talking. It's more like drink your beer as fast as you can. Obviously, we both cultures love sports, but I just think it's definitely different, the conversation that wraps around where we meet. That's different from that culture where Ireland is really looking to help and to really bring people in and community. And you know, again, as America is more isolated, where it's almost, it likes its isolation because it doesn't know the distinction. Now everybody goes over to Ireland, they're like, wow, you won't believe how friendly these people are. Like, we could do that, but you'd have to understand the vision, and you'd have to exercise some things that might challenge the way that you believe in kind of your agenda or what you want to get out of it. But if you drop some of it, it's going to leave you vulnerable in places, but we're all going to get there a little bit easier. So I don't know. That's just kind of the way I see it.
Yeah, no, it's a brilliant perspective. And it's, you know, I've thought about this too. I've kind of got into history a little bit more. I talked to Justin about this. So I have did a podcast with Justin. That's your ex-teammate from the national team.
Yeah.
He was a great guy.
Oh, he's the best.
He's brilliant. Yeah, he said he was like your little brother, you and Marty.
I think he was taking care of us. He's like, you guys are a model of what I'm not going to do.
Well, in fairness, you guys did okay. So I mean, he didn't have too bad people to look up to, but yeah, no, he just he seems to be a history buff as well, and yeah, just from my perspective and what you said, yeah, it almost seems like the adversity brought us together in this country because we were, I mean, until the '90s, like until this Celtic Tiger came along and we dropped our tax rate and all these tech companies
Yeah,
came in,
yeah,
we were poor most of the way,
yeah,
and we
yeah,
just got that independence
sure,
really, the post-colonial era of Ireland was just poverty as well. So it
yeah,
was always adversity. It was always tough.
yeah,
Everything was tight.
yeah.
You probably know the history. So
No,
I feel
yeah,
like that galvanized everybody. That brought everyone together.
that is the best way to, when you talk about sports. Now here goes back to any team I've ever been on. First of all, first and foremost, basketball, in my opinion, has a certain platform that's a little bit different than many sports. It's very fast and rapid paced. So there's, even in transition, offense, defense, you always have to be making decisions. So you're facing adversity all the time. So what it does is it tests the individual to see how well they can handle their own emotional management, but how also they're going to work with others as far as doing it. So from a very young age, watching children do this, you're watching in a celebration opportunity to say, how is my child or our youth working together with each other in this fun little vice of rules and agreements and competitive nature. So as that's doing that, you go through that, and again, as you talked about some of the accolades of, having played 12 years professionally. Well, some of those teams were some of the best moments of my life to be around a culture like we talked about earlier that could face adversity and could handle it with successful results. And doing that, it's like you learn a way of seeing things, or you've experienced things that then you move forward in life, and you start to put together those elements. You're saying, what made that success possible? Because it's not just the execution or sacrifice of athletes to say, hey, for this next 40 minutes, I'm going to be the best giving, serving human being I can be with a very high level of athleticism. But you are actually putting that out there, because it's like when people watch it, they're like, oh my gosh, did you see that second pass? Like, look at Steve Nash. Steve Nash on the court looks like the most unselfish person in the world. Now, that's not to say that Steve Nash doesn't get up from his living room and go get a glass of water for himself from the fridge, and he sits down. His wife slaps him and says, hey, why didn't you get one for me? I mean, it's like, but it is to say that basketball generates the space to watch how people play life. And it's funny because the adversity is what creates the growth moment. And without facing the adversity and sharing it together, you never get to that sense of brotherhood or family. Because first of all, think about it. Every locker room you ever started out a season in, you meet a diverse group of people from religion, race, ethnicity, age, all of that, ideology, whatever. And when you first get there, you're kind of cordial and shaking hands, this and the other. And then in the first 2 weeks, you're fighting each other. You're elbowing each other, you're pissed off at each other. Then you're fighting adversaries. And then all of a sudden you're celebrating with them. And then, it's like, it's 9 months later, the season's over, and these people are closer to you than your blood brothers. It's insane. So it's like adversity, like what you were sharing with like the history of Ireland, is like when people have that and everyone's facing it together, Jesus, how can you be, almighty and trying to be, egotistical? It's like, hey, we're all facing this. Now, how do we all help each other to do it? And I think that a lot of times when people try to escape that adversity, they don't have the connection later on in life. So it's like when you watch what's happening in the news today with all the different understandings of politics and stuff, especially in America, it's like, I feel sometimes at a disadvantage because I've experienced so much adversity with others, and I see the beauty in partnering with diversity, because it creates such a beautiful celebration of life that when you do get to see what's happening now, there's no barriers in my mind. I don't see people in different lights. I see people as, wow, what a great opportunity so we can work together and get to know each other and have time to I can share a little bit of myself and you can share a little about yourself, and then we can celebrate life. That to me is sports. But it's like, how do you create that in today's world where it breaks down the ties, like break down the fence between my yard and the next yard, so there's not just that person's barbecue, but the whole community's barbecue, so that we can all share in what we're doing. It's almost I mean, not to get too biblical, but it's really what God breathed when he shared the word church. It's the ability for everybody to come together and to keep each other in a space where you're facing adversity together, you're helping each other out, but you're also, holding people in judgment as well.
It's a brilliant point that you're making, and it's actually to compare basketball to. It's true, because I think when you're a younger player, especially, and as a younger person, you do more focus on the self, and you're trying to get yourself to a point where you're I suppose, able to operate at a certain level before you then start to look around you and then see who you can support. So I think naturally, when you're younger, you tend to help yourself and get yourself to a certain point. And then after that, you're reaching out to see if you can help others. Now, some people are better at it. I certainly had to learn, even in sport and basketball. I think when you're younger, you don't focus as much on sharing the ball. So if you have a good teacher or mentor, then maybe you do. It all depends on who you're taught by as well.
Totally agree. I think that whenever you have someone in a leadership role who can help somebody step outside themselves and exercise something, an application that might make them a little uncomfortable, but then, and this is the point too, is to self-reflect to see what value happened because then they adapt to those new traits or new ways of doing things. Because you and I have a way of making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and it's the one we've been making all our lives. But if someone ever came in and said, hey, what if you could do that better? You'd be like, better? I make a great peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Well, what if you could do this? And then all of a sudden you exercise something new inside of it. But if you don't have that person there, especially when you're younger, because I think that's what creates the ability to open mindset, is somebody gets so locked into something. Like if you didn't travel to China or you didn't travel other places, you might just think, hey, the Irish way is the only way and it's the way for me. And it's like, hey, have you ever had this over here? You ever seen this over here? You don't get to go break down those boundaries, and then you're locked in. And I see that a lot of time in parents. There's a generation who maybe I'm at the cusp of it. They don't have the breakdown of social norms and a lot of visiting different cultures and different ways of doing things. But now that we have social media and it's, let's say it's relatively free and easy to access, there's so much that's happening. And you get to go visit different things, whereas that generation back then is like, no, that's not possible.
I mean, it's true. And social media has probably helped. But I still think even within social media, like they see stuff, but then they've still got their pigeonholes and they're put people in boxes. Even if they see social media, they're still judging them on social media, I think sometimes. Unless you go as you say, actually maybe visit, or you're not in that trap mindset, then it's easier.
Yeah.
It's easier when you actually see it. There's a great quote, and I've forgotten now, but it's basically if you see it, then you'll actually understand it.
But you also have to give it a little bit of time too. It's funny is like I almost can see the way that generation like kind of peeks over the shoulder looking at a smartphone, and they just I'm not all the way in. I just want to see, and then it's like they walk away like, oh yeah, oh geez, I just saw a spaceship, I can't handle that.
The crazy thing is I'm probably a digital native. I'm 36, right? I don't know about yourself, but I probably am in that generation just about. But I'm still looking sometimes at like, what are these guys? Look at this guy is glued to the phone. Like you can tell he's got his headphones on. His whole life is clearly on his phone, and he's just glued to it. I'm like, I wonder what he's doing. He looks fascinated there. And so I'm even doing that, and I'm probably young enough to be, somebody that should be doing that as well.
Well, I'm looking at it. I'm 46, and I see so much value in it, but then I also see that there's it's funny is like it's like there's only one way to use something. You know, here's a smartphone. And again, I know we're going off. We're not even talking about basketball anymore. but we're talking about, there's so much technology. I can't even remember what they said. Like, as far as, like, if you went back to 1980 and you took all of these technologies with a camera and all these different apps, and you look to put that on a phone, like the millions and millions of dollars of understanding and knowledge is actually in these phones now. But kids are growing up with the ability to use smartphones, but I always look at it and go, are they growing up with a smartphone and understanding the benefits it can create in their life outside of entertainment? Because I have twin boys, and they're just graduating, and I'm always looking to help them to start up Google Calendar. You know, like, hey, look, you take this out and all these things, and I'm telling you, you can plan your future. And this is one of the coolest things. And, you know, while I'm saying that, it's like, they're like, do. I'm like, can you put the,
I actually have a quote. I could send you an email, a quote that I sent to my friend when he introduced me to Google Calendar, and I wrote back to him a year later, Google Calendar saved my life. I swear to God, because I have a terrible working memory. So it's interesting that you say that.
It's the best. It's about, I learned it about 10 years, well, not 10, about 8 years ago. And as soon as I did, I'm telling you, I got in the habit, because you obviously, again, you got to exercise that habit for so long. But every time someone would be like, hey, we should do lunch, I'd be like, okay, so what do you think? I've got the schedule here this next week. And they'd be like, whoa, that's quick. And I'm like, well, I'm pretty serious about making this happen. So let's schedule this, because I know we can do this. Whereas before, like what you were sharing, it's like, I have a terrible business memory or scheduling memory about it. So I would just be like, hey, were we doing that lunch? You know, someone's waiting, at a restaurant. And I'm like, oh, oops.
Yeah, and you come across like you don't care, but in fact, it's just, you probably have 101 things. And some people have a good mind for remembering, they can remember things. And I double book all the time.
Yeah.
And my friends are good. They're like, let me check the calendar. And then you check the calendar, and then, can't do it. And it's all fine.
Yeah. I think it's perfect. Like now I'm looking to create myself, my wife, the two boys, all on the same one, because with traveling and summer breaks and all that, it's like we need to know what the other three adults in our lives are doing, so we know how to book things. So
anyway, we went off with a total tangent there, which is brilliant. Okay, I got some questions.
Basketball questions, great.
Basketball related questions. So I want to chat about this. Someone just twittered me. That's not even a term, but he tweeted, sent me a private DM on Twitter just with a question, because I put that tweet out. It was actually the under-18s national team coach, Paul Kelleher.
Yeah.
Do you know Paul?
I believe I've met him. I have met him, I think, but I
put you on the spot there. Okay, so I want to start with, I watched Charlotte's podcast with you today, I thought was brilliant, and he's very intense on the podcast. I've never actually watched one of them before, but he was very good. He brought up your torturous memory of you on draft night as the first thing, which I thought was a bit a bit heavy, but at the same time, I suppose it's the adversity stuff, isn't it?
It definitely is. It's a growth point. It's definitely looking back now, it's extremely entertaining, but it was not fun at the time.
No, I can't imagine it was. We're not going to focus on that anyway. I've got loads of other questions I want to ask.
All right.
You said about I was interested in point about the undrafted rookie given a guaranteed contract. That was I didn't know that. That was quite cool. I'll come back to that point, because I've a really interesting. Well, it's a question anyway that I wanted to ask you about that.
Okay.
So, and then there's and then it was really good interview anyway. It was really cool to hear the questions that he had for you and the answers. A lot of emotive questions in there, so it's quite interesting. So we'll go back to the start, and I know you covered this a lot with everybody, but just to go through it quickly, I have a couple of questions around just when you were younger. I know you left at 3 or 4. That's
4. Yeah.
4 years of age, and then you emigrated and you went to Ohio. That's the confusion.
That's correct. Yeah.
So you went there. Whereabouts? It was Cleveland, wasn't it?
Yeah, Cleveland. Yeah.
Cleveland, Ohio, and So then, at that point, did you have? I mean, you're 4 years of age. Did you have any memories of Ireland?
No, I have
No.
no memory of the trip over.
Okay.
I'm the youngest of 6, and I think the other 5 siblings all have a memory of it, and I don't. I think my first memory is probably around 4.5, 5, probably later, when I remember taking my siblings to school with my mom, and there was a stroller, and myself and my next older brother, Niall, he and I would rotate back and forth who was sitting and who was that. That's one of my fondest memories. Or the winter time, just a pile of boots and gloves, and I would be sitting on top of them as all my brothers and sisters were getting ready for school. And that's about it.
Okay. So, and did you grow up then with like this was another podcast you kind of asked you this, but did you grow up with all the the tin whistles and did you get to learn the language and all that stuff?
All of our Christmas gifts were in Gaelic, so none of us would wake up in the middle of the night and break into them and unwrap them. But yeah, my parents, I believe my parents really stayed true to the Irish culture. Like, they didn't stray away from it. Like, my parents would never have brought home Chinese food or anything like that. And I think there was a little bit of what we talked about earlier. It's like they just were locked in. There might have been, so many different things on the menu, that were coming in all the time. It was, a lot of fish, a lot of stew, a lot of cabbage. I mean, it was just, you didn't know anything else. And so, yeah, we were in Ireland because of all of the Irish in Cleveland because of all the Irish there. There was a number of cultural clubs, Irish cultural clubs. So you'd have like the West Side Club and the East Side. So we were going to Irish dances and things all the time, My dad actually even had it would be something relative to what you're doing here, but let's say in a much smaller sense, he actually, he bought some time on the local cable network, and he had an Irish cultural hour. And he had, and honest to God, he had no business putting on a blue blazer with a little emblem and just, hello and welcome to the Irish cultural hour, and he was putting on Paddy Riley tapes, and it was all like, it was not on the up and up. It all had copyrights on it.
So he's from Mayo, right? You said he's from Mayo.
Yeah.
Because it's funny, because I have some sense of what he was going through. And again, I didn't have kids when I was in the UK, but you do feel you're losing your grip of your identity a little bit when you leave the country.
Yeah.
It's real, and I experienced it. And I was in London working in a corporate job with people with very English accents, and you do find yourself talking more like them.
Yeah.
You go back home for Christmas and people are like, what are you doing talking like that? Especially Ireland people, they're very unforgiving. They call you out for it.
Oh, yeah.
So I very quickly found myself kind of going, oh my God, I'm losing every ounce of Irish, every sense of being Irish. And I started to, this is not even a joke, I started to listen to like Luke Kelly and these Irish singers just to kind of keep my sense of Irishness, because I didn't want to lose. I didn't want to become someone different, completely different. And you could quite easily do that. So I understand what your dad was going through.
Well, they were, my mom and dad were obviously the biggest influence at that time. So if we went on a road trip and we were going camping, the cassette tapes were always, Paddy Riley, the Chieftains. They were just, it was always playing Irish. And we wouldn't, I'm telling you, I wouldn't have known what rock and roll or what was on the thing, because it was all, my mom would open up the glove box and there'd be the Fox's mints and things. So it's like, it was just Irish in an American wrapper. It was just like, we're going around, and then we would never be talking about basketball, like the other sports.
Yeah.
Like if family was coming over to visit, it was fun. I can remember one time piling in my uncle's basement, and at the time, VHS tapes and all those cassette tapes I think they were just starting to become popular, and someone had just gone to Ireland. They recorded the All Ireland, and now get this, Mark, this is how crazy it was. They had the TV in America. For some reason, they had the TV upside down, connected to this VCR that was as big as this printer over here. And it was so scrambled, you know, but they were all looking at it like they could see it. They're like, oh, yeah. And you would hear the faintest little announcer on there. And they stayed there listening to the whole thing. I'm like, someone get the Aleve or the Tylenol, because everyone here is going to have a migraine here in about 30 minutes. It was just, but that's how desperate, like you were sharing, is they just wanted it. My last, but this is one of my favorite. I always wish somebody would do some sort of comedic skit on this, because there's something then is like you have a need and desire for that culture, right? Because that's the way you grew up. And when you're ever around it, you know, it's like, turn the music up louder. And I'm so proud. And whenever my grandparents used to come over, or aunt and uncle, somebody coming over from Ireland, back then, they didn't have so much of the metal detector. You could actually walk down to the terminal gate. Right now, you can't go anywhere near it. You know, you're so far away. You got to wait till they come off the plane and come off of a train or something. So we could go all the way up to the gate. And I can remember myself and all my cousins, we'd be running around, whoever was coming. Now, this is the bit. As soon as that person would get up, they'd always have some sort of a duffel bag. And I'm telling you, it was like drug cartel coming in. And all of the adults would lean in like a huddle, and it would be, they would walk in shoulder to shoulder, and they'd be like, did you bring the sausages? And they would zip that thing. And I'm telling you, they would open up that bag this much, and like 5 heads would all lean in, and they would just see the Galtee sausages. And everyone would be like, nice. That's very, oh, that's grand there. And we go straight to somebody's house, turn on the stove. We're going to light up some bangers, some sausage. I mean, we're doing everything, frying everything. That's just how we lived. And I would be thinking that probably everybody else in the world was doing the same thing.
Yeah. I had a funny experience when I left Ireland, similar with the kind of just like, I was in the bubble, like obviously till I was 18, and then I left for Scotland, which is a whole different kettle of fish. It's like the Irish on bloody crack or something. Like, they're just like new level of crazy. I thought I was leaving for a more sophisticated lifestyle, but I was rudely awakened when I went to Scotland. But anyway, in a brilliant way. They love Irish people as well. So, but I remember going into, this is how kind of unaware as an Irish person, how simple things are in Ireland.
Yeah.
I was in first year university, and we were all sitting in a big group in a pub actually. And the guy, I had ordered some food, and I really was one of these people who just didn't really care. I just take whatever. And they came down with the food, and we're in this group of 10 people. And they go, oh, it's chicken tikka masala. And I went, they're looking at me. I'm like, no. I was like, no, I ordered a curry. And they all just looked at me, and they were like a curry, a chicken tikka masala is a curry. And at that point, I realized that I was the most naive person in the whole place, and that nobody in Longford, and they were laughed at me. And I thought, I don't know what you're laughing at, because nobody in my town would know that.
Yeah.
But I just didn't see that until I left.
Yeah.
And then I go back, and it's only when you leave and come back then, and you have that perspective of like, God, like blissfully, I don't know, blissfully ignorant. That's a negative way of putting it, but just like, just happy in the simplest of ways.
It's not even an insult. It's like, it's simplistically good.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, hey, we just call it this. Yeah. When I would travel, like I was playing in Greece, I found myself in those same situations. You know, like somebody would want to teach me something worldly, but it came almost like as a, you know, you're the butt of a joke, laughing. And I'm like, what? We don't pronounce it like that, or we don't say that. And it was like, I'm coming from millions of people, so I know that they do say it different over there. I'm not just one person trying to change a language or the definition of something.
Yeah, it's tomatoes. Yeah. And as you go, you kind of realize, oh yeah, we were all saying it wrong in Ireland or whatever it was. So
or we're just saying it our way. And the funny thing is the culture's so funny. If you took someone from over there and they brought it over, they had said it like that, everyone was sitting there, were like, "Well, you're so posh."
Yeah, I know. They'd laugh at you in Ireland.
Yeah.
They'd laugh at you for saying it like that.
You get some looks. Everybody around the room like, "Who's this guy?"
Like, you couldn't come back and say croissant in my town. You'd say croissant, because you'd be thinking, you're not French. You know, you don't say restaurant. You say restaurant. So it's different horses for different courses. Anyway, we've gone off on another tangent anyway. But
yeah, no worries.
Just interesting to kind of get that sense of you really grew up in essentially, as you said, like a kind of Ireland, an annex of Ireland in Ohio type situation. Yeah, that's interesting. Cool. Okay. So I wanted to go on to in terms of basketball, just when you went to Mariner High School? Is that
Mariner, yeah.
Mariner High School. Yeah, my friend is actually from Columbus, Ohio. One of my best mates, and he just has some interesting views about Ohio, but anyway, we won't get into that. So you played hockey for 8 years, and that's, I know you mentioned that before. I mean, like Gaelic and basketball have transferable skills. Do you think there was anything in that helped in terms of like, even like hand-eye coordination, just the speed of the game, peripheral vision, kind of, that kind of,
I think
hockey assist maybe?
Yeah, right. No, I think spacing was something, you'd understand that would be, like again with football, and that you'd also get that understanding. But it's at such a young age. I think what was really transferable was maintaining a competitive nature. Like it wouldn't be such a skill set as it would be understanding, giving it your all, like again, handling adversity. Those type of experiences, like being disciplined enough to be, to show up to practices early and things like that. I don't think at such an age with it, because I transferred over, like I stopped playing hockey around 13 or 14, and I picked up basketball around 15 years old. There was a little brief stint of American football in there, but it was something that the way I talk now, I would probably need myself to go and talk to myself at 15 to actually be understandable about what to transfer, because it's such a different skill set. Ice hockey is more with your legs, and it's a lateral movement to pick up speed. And then, as we know in basketball, it's a little more, your legs are predominantly what you need to have the strength in, but it's a lot of vertical jumping. Like, I can tell you this, my calves weren't developed at all. I mean, I probably had bones with skin on them and not even a shred of a calf muscle. So yeah, so there's a lot of stuff that you just look at and you say, okay, at that time, and I've said this in a number of interviews, at that time, the frustration that I was feeling wasn't because I didn't have skill set. It was probably because I wasn't being appreciated. That here's somebody who's, I put 8 years into ice hockey, and I would kick the shit out of all of you if we were on the ice rink, but we're not. We're playing this other game. We got to put this ball in a metal cylinder, and I haven't practiced that, where you probably have been doing it for 8 years. So I know that I'm taller than all of you, but I have no idea. But with kids, it's just their perception is, oh, what a waste. Look at all that height being wasted.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not done yet.
I just got started. Yeah.
I just got started. You guys are 8 years into it, and some of you guys can't even hit a free throw. So I don't know what I'm missing here.
Yeah, and I've met a lot of guys, even one or two guys that came on the podcast, that they started late, and as you said, they didn't get that attention, and maybe some players would be quite unforgiving, especially when you've grown up, especially probably in America, where there's a lot of maybe even families of basketball people. There's a pedigree there, and you come in and you're late to the game, and it can be like that with basketball. People can be kind of judgy and be like, he's big but he can't play, or whatever they say. I've seen it, so I understand. But
I'd say it's rough too. America is very judgmental, especially in youth sports, right. And it's accepted now. It doesn't have a moral space where people are like, hey, well, what's your agenda here? Like, why are you saying that to that person? Like, because I think he sucks and I just want to say it. It's like, well, how do you build team? Because if you're building team and you want him to be better, it's like, where is that? And I think, again, as I'm going off on a tangent here, but I think that's where a couple years ago when Kevin Love and the player from Toronto has started speaking about mental health.
Right.
Like, we've created a culture in youth sports where we don't actually check in with people. And that's one of the things where I've always said that my high school coach, the second one that I had, was the one who started that with me. And I started to understand the value, because he takes somebody virtually from nowhere and no skill set. And he sent me off on this just great freaking lightning bolt to go play 12 years professionally. And everybody who ever met me since the beginning were like, he did what? Oh yeah, he went and played 12 years. So he made the NBA. They're like, the kid that couldn't shoot the basketball has played in the NBA. It's like, well, I was blessed because that person, that coach, was able to create, hey, how you doing? What's going on? It was more of a friendship relationship, but it was built on thought-provoking questions, and it was righteousness of saying, hey, you can't do this, you can't do this, this is your ceiling, you'll never go further than this. It was all like, what do you want to do? How do you want to, like, what can we do to do that? And a lot of my answers at the time were, I have no idea. I'm 15 years old. But it was like, he'd leave me on it. He'd plant a seed, and I'd sit there and go, hey, I kind of looked into this and I think this. He'd go, okay, let's start doing those things. And then I'd start changing the way I was playing. But again, to go back to that piece, is that coach space has to have the opportunity to grow that in somebody. And they have to have the ability then to check on their emotional status, because most basketball players stop playing basketball from, I think it's around 14 years old to around 16, right there. It's right around, in America, it's like, I think it's like 7th grade to 9th grade. And there's a lot going on at that time. First of all, you're coming out of the formidable years, puberty's starting to hit. So, the size things happening, people get big, and most of it is the emotional management of kids is when it's not fun anymore, it becomes easy to quit. So if I don't have someone to say, well, why isn't it fun? Well, maybe the reality is, in self-reflection, it's not fun anymore because I've stopped working on things that help me to be effective. I'm only shooting half-court shots at practice. Those are fun. You go, well, is that going to translate? Because, when you're not getting in, is it the coach is a dick? Or is it because you haven't looked at, well, what is the coach requesting of you? And if you could write those things down, well, how could you start to change that? Because if you could deliver what it is you want, maybe you'd get more. But a lot of kids just quit on the fact, they talk to their parents and they say, it's not fun anymore. Well, there's always the driveway.
Yeah, I was just talking to a coach, it was actually Paul on the last episode, and he was saying that from a coach's perspective, and you're talking from a coach's perspective there, it's important for the coach to have some flexibility with the players. And you could see it, I was saying it to him at the highest level with Rodman, where, I don't know if you saw The Last Dance, he let him off to go. Yeah, and he couldn't, he might have said, do you know who I am? Or he might have thought, do you know who I am? If this is disrespectful. There's plenty of reasons why he could have said no. I mean, in fact, it's shocking that he did it, but he did it. And I remember reading his book, the kind of Zen master book, I've forgotten the name of it now, but Spiritual Hardwood.
Rodman's?
No, it was Phil Jackson's.
Phil Jackson's, the Zen Master or something.
The Zen Master, and it was just very philosophical, and he kind of talking about coming from a place of love and understanding and empathy, and I kind of read it and thought, obviously it worked for him. I mean, it's a totally different perspective than, let's say, you talked about, who was the coach you had in New York? Van Gundy. Yeah, he was the opposite. He was the old school kind of hard ass, like. Well,
I think there's in the, let's say, the scientific terms of it, there's the autocratic space of leadership, and then there's the democratic, and then there's the laissez-faire of like, well, what can we do? But inside of those, each of them almost has to have a source. So I think it's pretty widely spread that most coaches, now this is just my opinion, they coach out of fear or fear-mongering. So it's like the threat of what's going to happen if I don't do this. It's screaming at them. It's always, it's almost like the military wants to break you down to your nuts and bolts, and then wants to build you back up, but they tear you down completely before. And that's a lot of the ways I saw the coaches in Europe is they just look to kind of create that fear of, you know, days off, or you're not going to do this, or if this happens, we're going to do this, we're going to be going to 4-hour video sessions. And it's like, you know,
but there's something, I mean, it's a fine line, isn't it? But like the motivation through fear versus the kind of, I think they call it the charismatic leader who kind of motivates through reward, and
sure,
which is a great way to do it too. But that old school, there's something about, I mean, I even heard someone say to me at work, like, a little bit of fear is good, or something like that.
I think that the fear space can also take part in personal fear, because everybody has to fear something. So I think the charismatic leader, the ones that I think that do the best at this, have the ability to find out what it is each individual player is looking to achieve. And then how do we harness everyone's singular energy into this group energy, and what do we all want to achieve? And when you talk about this, again, is not to talk about right or wrong, but to talk about effective or effective ways to approach things, how to play, how to rebound, how to shoot, all these different players doing things. There's a conversation in every one of them where you don't have to yell at people. You can actually sit down with them. And I think you can harness energy by, you know, talking about, well, what is it you're looking at? Well, are we doing that? Or what's happened in the last 3 games? Or what's your goal for this season as far as your defense? Or let's look at these numbers. And it becomes in my belief, it becomes a more mature way and respectful way of doing things that allows the space of saying, hey, you are somebody I respect and somebody I want to team up with, but I also want to team up to find solutions. Now, not to get me wrong inside of this, because I've had this conversation with coaches, is there are moments you can have that when you have a lengthy period of time, like a full season or a 2-year contract, you're talking about the macro sense of like, how do we achieve this, not down to the micro day by day. So when you're going over this macro sense of like what we're looking to do when we partner together, there's also a moment in the game where the autocratic space has to be just command demand. And that's like, you know, you're at 5 seconds left on the clock. Give me the board. Everybody shut up and get in here.
Right,
because you need that moment. And you can't sit there and go, hey, what are we going to do, you all? Like, you know, here's some thought-provoking questions. Like, it's over then. By that point, it's all writing it out and talk about it. And then they should know the fear in being an effective of listing and getting it done is obviously the win or loss inside of that, you know, that game time.
The consequence of that is a loss. They should get that at that point. Yeah, and it's obvious at that point. But you're right, the day-to-day management, and it's something I've learned to do as a player. I was one of these guys who was a little bit ruthless to his teammates actually when I was younger, and then I very quickly. My brother told me one day. He said, "You can't talk to people like that, Mark." I came back to Ireland and I played at I suppose a better level for a period, and then I came back and I would be training with whatever I was doing. And I was so, I don't know, I couldn't believe, if I look back now, I can't believe it, but I was so, just on the basketball court, just so, like, I'd just be really kind of ruthless to, and then my brother was like, these guys are playing for fun, like, you can't do that. And then I realized, I went back and continued my study in Scotland, and I changed my attitude towards my teammates and did the opposite. I remember watching a video about Larry Bird, and you know, just give him the pat on the back and say, get the next one. I just switched it just because I just thought, let me just try this. And the results are so much better that I realized you don't have to shout. You can tell them the exact same thing. Just in a different way. So
I believe when you do, you give the opportunity to exercise, obviously, patience, because it's funny because a lot of what we talk about, we can go back and it's like what you experienced in Scotland when you order the curry is they didn't have a distinction or an open mindset to say there's other parts of the world. Now that's innocent ignorance. Ignorance obviously is not an insult. It's just an honest way of saying not knowing something. But then when you get into neglect, you know, that's when it's like you don't tell them. So it's like there's a part of you that's okay saying it to them. It's the approach then. So what you have then is you go off and you play at a high level, then you go off and play at another higher level, then you come back to revisit this, and it's like you're going, what the hell? And distinction is in your mind now. And when distinction comes in, that's the hardest place not to be righteous, because you've seen another standard of something and you want it to be there, but they just can't. And you can't do it in one day. And you can't push them into that doorway of how to do it, because they're like, listen, you went away, you've been getting up at 6 a.m. shooting, and you've been, doing all the exercises and the strength training, and you're the one who had that contract, and you're the one, but we've just been sitting over here eating curry and chips.
Yeah, and I still struggle with it sometimes mentally. Like I still play. I'm playing one more season, and I'm looking at these guys, and I'm like, God, so now I feel a certain way, and I feel an emotion about it, and I'm like, this is annoying me that these guys won't like do X or Y to prepare, let's say, for example. But I know the right approach is not to just get annoyed and just say that.
Yeah.
I know the right approach is to go and talk to them and say, I can help you.
Yeah.
Talk to them and say, here's an idea. Let's go and do this, to prepare for the game. And that's the approach that's the right approach, that actually supports the person and doesn't demoralize them.
You also have to look too, Mark. You have to be careful of this. You have to look and say, what's your agenda compared to what theirs is? Because we all go to the party for different reasons. And if your agenda is to go and and to listen to classical music, and somebody else is to go and drink all the beer in the room, they're not going to add up. And it's like, you could sit there and be like, Jesus, you can't dribble the ball. Come here, can I? It's like, they're like, hey, I'm not here to dribble the ball correctly or learn how to play. I'm just here to show off my new runners. It's like, for some reason you don't even know. It's like, that's why I'm so pissed off over here.
Yeah, well, it's true. And that can happen too. Guys just like to put on a headband and run around the court.
Yeah, you're like, and I'm not picking that guy. Are you here to play or for the fashion show? You go over on that team. I want 4 guys who want to play competitive basketball here.
Yeah. And that can actually tear you up if you're on the team with a guy and you don't understand why he won't get back in transition, and you're just it's heart-wrenching, because you're like, okay, I can't say nothing I can say to you is going to make you do it. So I was playing in a league, and this guy recently, he was I'm telling you, we were warming up doing layup lines, right? And he just stood about where the first spot was on one side, and he was looking at us. And I was like, does he not know what layup lines are? Now he was doing this for 3 games. I'm like, is this guy? Is he all right? And then we get into the game. The last game, he takes the last 4 possessions. Now this guy is 5'6", heavy build. And he's just getting his stuff blocked out of there. And he totally sabotages our game. And I'm thinking, what the heck is going on? And again, it's just a community league. So I'm like, I'm just here really for the exercise, but I'd like to play a little bit of competitive basketball. So after the game, probably the captain of our team, he's like, Pat, come here. So I sit next to him, and he's like, hey man, what are we going to do about Isaiah? And I'm like, I don't know. I said, I've never seen somebody with so much confidence. I said, Jesus, if I had that much confidence, I think I could run out the door and just try to jump and fly home. just land 6 inches to the ground and go, why isn't this working? It's a picture of you like in some kind of, it looks like a community center and you just kind of have your hands on your hips like this, and you're do that. And then there's like 4 guys that just average Joe guys. Yeah. And it's a funny picture. I don't know if that was the actual game.
The kids. No. Oh no, that's I played a 3-on-3 tournament a couple months. That was like right before the pandemic started. Yeah, my nephew called me and he's like, hey, do you still got it? I'm like, I think. I don't know. Find out.
I'll have a go.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Right. I'll go back to my little discussion points here. But it's just it's great doing the tangent stuff. Okay. So then you go to Auburn College in Alabama. So I just had a quick look at the campus. It's gorgeous, beautiful. William J. Samford building. It just looks like a beautiful campus. Was it like an affluent uni? Was it like how was all that? And Alabama, what the hell's about Alabama?
Oh, we were talking about cultures, just culture shock going. Wow. See, I'm leaving my home, 18 years old, never really done anything. I can tell you, I remember when my mom and dad dropped me off, Mark, I can't even explain this stuff. When that car was driving away, I was in the fit of tears, and I was like, we're going to run and grab the bumper and just hold it all the way for the 9-hour drive back, just down the highway.
No excitement. You weren't like
excitement, but fear. Like
right.
you've been counting on people your whole life, and maybe I had some bit of confidence and alpha male competitiveness on the basketball court in high school, but Jesus, this was like, hey, you're by yourself. Good luck.
And were you a social guy? Like, were you like a really kind of extroverted kind of person? Like, do you know what I mean? Would you have just been chatting to people, going up to them? Like Justin. Justin's very extroverted.
At 6'10", I didn't have that luxury, because you walk into a room and it's like every day you walk into the room, you're wearing a purple sombrero and you got roller skates on, and everybody turns and like, holy shit, look at this guy. And that happened to me ever since, let's say, 17. So I lived that life. It took me a long time to get used to it, that it's a blessing. Like, oh my gosh, I don't have to work the room will actually work me. Like, I just walk in and everybody's going to come by, and it's so funny. It's like, I can see that person's going to come up to me in 10 minutes. That person's going to take about an hour. These people over there are having a bet about how tall I am. And so when I got to school, I didn't have any of that experience. I only had probably the embarrassment of ever talking to a girl saying hi, and she'd say, get away from me, you freak, or something, So it's like, you don't have the confidence. You think you do, but it's like, no, I'm exposed. I'm out here by myself. So I've always thought myself as being social, but it took a number of years before I started to realize, look, I want to be okay, and people are relatively, you give them an opportunity, and when you communicate and you work on your agenda to get to know people and not just, try to get yours first, then the world starts to change for you. Then you start to realize, like, this is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's like not talking about yourself too much. Yeah. It's a real, that's a skill as well. Okay. So you went there, and then just to talk more basketball, I suppose, because it's meant to be a basketball podcast. I'm just fascinated with the story. I mean, I'd probably talk to the wall in that sense. But so you went to Alabama. So what did you study, actually? Yeah, I know this isn't basketball really.
I started off, and I was looking to get something in physical education, and I got into some of the class coursework, and I just thought to myself, I don't think this is truly what I want to do. And then I went into their communications department, and I started to go to the communications and started to learning a lot about, broadcasting and the importance of communication and wordsmith and just all types of things. And it really interests me a lot, of understanding audience. And it was funny, as I was always an average student. And once I got there, I started making high grades. And it was something that it was just fun to go to class. And it wasn't like a lot of like kinesthetic learning where you're just doing things. It was a lot of studying things, and I was just very interested in looking into this type of stuff. So I probably didn't have a great relationship with my professors because of class and balancing the basketball. But a lot of my professors really understood that I had this opportunity to play pro potentially, and they were very forgiving for a lot of my absence and a lot of like just asking a lot of questions. I can remember showing up like 30 minutes late to an hour-long class, and the professor, it was almost obnoxious, but he wasn't. He was being completely genuine. He was like, this is what I'm talking about. I thought he was ready to bitch me out. He's like, this is what I'm talking about. Just make an effort, kids. Just make an effort. Now, he probably didn't think he was going to make it here, but he made it here. And I was sitting there going, I am fucking 30 minutes late. I'm probably going to be here just to sign the attendance and walk out of here. But it's crazy.
Yeah, lectures get funny about when you turn up late. We had not that it's maybe because she's like from China and they're like communists over there, but she used to get so mad. We were doing our masters. I did it with a couple of American lads that were on scholarships, postgraduate. And we'd be in class, and she put a piece of like tape that they put up on the roads when there's She put that across the barriers after the time, because people were coming in late all the time. And she goes, no, nobody will come in, and that's that. And she put the tape across, and then two guys just wander in 10 minutes later, and they just step in underneath it and just walk up, and the whole place just erupts. And it was just a demonstration of like, that doesn't work. You can't be so military about that kind of stuff. But anyway, I understand that. But so this is what I wanted to ask you about your college career. So I got the sense that in the first 2 years you were like, now correct me if I have this completely wrong, but you were kind of more of a learning trajectory. It was maybe you were kind of saying that some of the older guys were like saying, who's this guy coming in or whatever. And then by the last 2 years, you had learned a lot and you had improved significantly.
Yeah.
I just had a question. I just had a question on sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but just had a question on that in particular. And this is something that I think needs focus in this country, so that's maybe why I'm bringing it up, and it could be my own agenda. Is that, was strength training a big part of that, or was it more skills development, or was it a bit of both, or was it the coach? What factors kind of made you a better player?
I'm going to wow you a lot. Is when I first came in, I didn't possess all of the above, and so I redshirted. And then the adversity hits again. So it's, have I made the right decision? I don't have the answers of how to do this. I didn't know any strength training programs. I didn't know basic nutrition and how to actually bulk up. So I was fortunate in that situation that, and anybody can do this. You can go request. I always tell kids, don't look for the fake it till you make it. Don't just go out and do 100 jumping jacks every day and think you're going to improve your vertical or something. It's like, you can go to people who actually have certifications in these things, and they can write up plans for you. So I was fortunate that at the university at that time, I redshirt, and I basically live with the strength trainer and the nutritional trainer. So I'm going in and I'm working out every day on their plan. They're doing like 6-week plans, and they keep changing them up, and I'm sore from top to bottom. And the nutritional plan was, it was so many peanut butter sandwiches. It sounds so funny, but I had to make sure that I had so much calorie in that between classes, I had to report, a couple of us, because we were so skinny, I had to report to the weight room, and I had to down like 4 peanut butter sandwiches and then make my way back to class.
It's full of protein.
It's full, and I'm like, I never want to touch a peanut butter sandwich again in my life. So that was creating the athletic prowess, the ability to perform, but obviously the skill set wasn't there. So I was missing a lot of it. So the progression of practice and just the overall training in the spring, that was also a big factor in it, because again, I'm not making the plans for the training. I'm dealing with experts. These assistant coaches or the trainers are the actual ones doing it. So your game just starts to progress, and you don't really know it's happening. Now, this is where I'd say the biggest thing that I did that was one of those fake it till you make it overly done things was my junior and senior year, they switched the strength coach, and we got one of the coaches from the football program who came over. And somehow I got in my mind that I had to get stronger, much, much stronger. I was watching my junior year, Eric Dampier was a highly recruited, highly sought after draft pick who was at Mississippi State. And we were playing them in the last tournament my junior year, elimination round. We're about to leave. And I'm looking at him at the free throw line as I'm lined up. I'm like, God, look at this guy's arms. Look how muscular he is. I'm like, I'm going to strength train. And I went from about 255 pounds, athletic as can be. I came back my senior year after this, came back for my senior year, and I was about 280 pounds. Wow. And I couldn't move. I was a robot. I had followed no plan. I probably looked like a drumstick. I could do 200 push-ups, but I probably could only jump 20 inches in the air. So it was one of those things that it totally cursed my senior year. And it became such a mental thing. I was like, what's happened? Because I stayed in the weight room, and my head coach, Cliff Ellis, at one point just came up to me and he cursed me out. He was like, don't go into that damn weight room again. You're strong enough. You don't need any of that. And I was sitting there like, I don't know what I was thinking. I just got so into it. It became, you need to have that ability to have someone to coach you in it and interpret for you, like, what do you need to do? And I wasn't listening to people. There was nobody, I wasn't asking the right questions.
That's really interesting. So, like, it's almost like you went for it, and then almost because you didn't make it sports specific, and there's a lot more of that now.
Yeah.
There's much more information on that now, and sports science is just like I was just saying. It's like tech; it's almost exponentially just going. So, I mean, like even the recovery, everything, the mobility stuff, all that stuff.
Yeah. So when I left there, when I left there, I went to Spain. And that's where Europe introduced to me a new way of strength training. It was just at the cusp. It was probably in some forms of probably USA basketball and things like that. But there was a lot of understanding of mobility and creating training on multi-planes as far as movement. So it wouldn't be linear exercises as it would be, doing sport-specific movements, but it would be training different muscle groups in your body. So I get back down to 255 that year with Tao, and all of a sudden I'm jumping again, and I was like, "This is awesome! I got it back." And I was a little bit of depression, like, did I just ruin everything? But I got back to just finding out what was important, finding out how to train again with the trainer over there. And I remember I came back for a summer camp at Auburn for the little kids, and I was talking in front of the coaches, and one of my assistant coaches came and he was like, "That's the Pat Burke I know. That's the junior Pat Burke that got all the NBA people interested." He's like, "I'm glad you're back. You got way too big." And I was like, "Wow. Yeah, totally confirming that."
That's crazy that you got too big. I mean, you do see it with some guys that, I mean, like even at the highest level, it can happen.
Yeah.
And I guess if you had had more the direction with that, you probably would have. Wouldn't happen like that. But, But was involved in that as well? Was there, like, in that journey that you went with the S&C guys? Was there did plyometrics was a thing, or did they call it plyometrics, or like that explosive kind of training? Was that part of it, or was it a lot of more kind of strength?
I think they were dabbling in things, because there's the top schools probably had people that were at the cusp of what Michael Jordan's Tim Grover style stuff. So there's obviously the game changes and transitions a lot. So is it getting faster? Is it getting more foul ridden? Is it getting more physical underneath? So you're building yourself for that. So at that time, like the way I was then, like that senior year would not work in the NBA now. Like the NBA, like for a professional, it's all these hybrid athletes that are running so fast, being 40-inch verticals, 6'8", 6'10", handle the ball, shoot with distance, all that. Back then, it was still the age of dinosaurs. So you still had the Yao Mings were still coming. They're about to come into the league. Shaquille O'Neal was there. Eddie Curry was it. So these guys are like 300 pounds. So you're not just training for your success in the collegiate side, but you're also trying to impress any scouts that are coming in, like, yeah, I can see this guy's strong enough, but I'm like, yeah, but am I mobile enough? Well, we don't need you mobile. We need you strong enough to keep Shaq out of the lane. So a lot of it was, not so much what I needed to be successful as a good basketball player, but it was more, how do I build myself as somebody that they could see stepping in and playing right now?
Which is interesting, because Rodman talks about that. He said, straight away, I knew I couldn't be the scoring guy, even though he scored in college.
Yeah.
He recognized that there was an opportunity for him to have a different role and fit in the NBA. Because, I mean, I just from what I hear, you either have to specialize in something,